I think the balls are already in motion because, we had this big increase in consumer prices in 2021. We get the official CPI numbers, I think, on Wednesday here, but it's going to show that prices were up 7%, maybe a little bit more, during 2021. That would be the highest rate, I think, since 1982-ish. But, if we still measured prices the way we measured them in 1982, we would have, reported about a 15% increase in consumer prices, which would make it worse than any individual year during the 1970s or 1980. So this was a horrible year of inflation, and I think this is, really the beginning of the end, because now the Fed can no longer justify 0% interest rates and quantitative easing. It needs to raise interest rates, and it's now talking about raising interest rates, and it may in fact raise them. We'll see. It may not just talk, it may actually do it. But the problem is, even the rate hikes they're talking about are too small and too late to make a difference, because the Fed is talking about raising interest rates maybe to 1% by the end of the year, and then maybe to 2% by the end of next year. Well, we got 7% inflation. You can't raise rates to 1 or 2%. Rates need to be higher than the rate of inflation if you want to slow the rate of inflation. So interest rates need to go, 10%. But of course, we can't even get near 10%. We can't even get to 5%. We have so much debt because of all the past money printing and all the stimulus of the Fed. They have created a situation where it's impossible to fight inflation, and so they won't do it. And that's going to be the seeds of the next crisis, because as the Fed is, tightening up on its monetary policy to make it less loose, right? We're not going to have tight money. We're just going to have money that's less loose than it was before. The problem is less loose is not enough to sustain the asset bubbles, in a lot of these financial assets. So we get a crash, but it's not tight enough to actually bend the inflation curve. And so inflation is going to keep getting worse, even as the Fed is hiking rates supposedly to fight it. That's going to lead to stagflation. That's ultimately going to cause the Fed to reverse course and start easing again, even though inflation will be worse than when it started its tightening campaign. And somewhere along the way, the markets are going to wake up to this reality, and the dollar, or the bottom rather, is going to drop out of the dollar, and then we're going to have a currency crisis that will morph into a sovereign death crisis. And then it's all over. Then we have a real collapse, because then the Fed has to let interest rates go way up, and everything comes crashing down in a much more spectacular way than '08, except nobody gets bailed out. Everybody has to suffer the losses in their entirety, and they'll be much bigger. Or they don't have the guts to do that, and they just keep printing money anyway, and they print the dollar into oblivion, and we have hyperinflation, which of course would be even worse. We certainly can't prevent it. Politicians and central bankers have delayed it. They've done a very good job at delaying it, but there's a heavy price to be paid for that delay, because delaying it makes it worse when it happens. But that's okay for most politicians, because if it happens on somebody else's watch, well, then it's somebody else's problem. But the public, I'd rather do the right thing now and get the pain over with than, keep doing the wrong thing and then ultimately have an even more painful experience. But on an individual basis, if you recognize what is going to happen and understand what's already happened, you can position yourself on a personal level to profit from what's going to unfold. There's always going to be winners and losers. In every economic crisis, there are winners. There are a lot of losers, and the losers, there's a lot of stories about the losers. It's very high profile, but fortunes are made during those times. A lot of people made fortunes during the Great Depression. They were able to buy up assets on the cheap that they never would have been able to buy but for those circumstances, and that later ended up being, a springboard to incredible wealth. So I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity for people to get rich while a lot of other people are going broke, right? So the question is, how do you avoid going broke and stay rich if you're already rich, or maybe get richer, or maybe get rich if you're not rich now? How can you take advantage of the circumstances? And I think what you need to do is you need to understand all of the artificially inflated assets and get out of those. So don't own the stuff that's going to crash, but own the things that are going to rise in value when all that stuff crashes. Get out of the most overvalued currencies and into more fairly or better valued currency. Or better yet, get out of currencies completely and own real money. Own gold and silver. But own assets in countries, emerging markets, whose economies will get benefit from what's about to happen. Certain asset classes and businesses will thrive in this environment. Because I think if the dollar crashes, the way I believe, Americans are going to substantially reduce their spending. And right now we have these record trade deficits. The world is sending a lot of goods to America that we can't afford and we didn't produce. But those are goods that the world produced, and they don't get to consume those goods. They sent them over here to America, and we got them. And what did we give the producers? We gave them pieces of paper. We printed up some money and gave it to them. Well, when that money crashes, they're not going to want it anymore. So all that merchandise isn't going to be shipped over to the United States. But that doesn't mean they're going to stop producing it. It just means somebody else is going to consume it. And so try to figure out who is going to consume what Americans are too broke to consume. And start investing in those economies where standards of living are going to rise and costs of living are going to go down. Because the world has been supporting the United States for decades, and that's been a big burden. And when that burden is no longer there, it's a huge windfall for the rest of the world, because now instead of having to support America, they free up those resources to invest in their own economies. They have all those goods that now they can consume that previously were being diverted for American consumption. So Americans suffer, right? Because our ride on the global gravy train is over. We can't just consume anymore without producing, but the rest of the world has been producing. They just haven't consumed it all because they've sent their stuff here. So I think there's going to be big changes in the global economy, the global pecking order, relative values of currencies and assets and incomes. And I think if you're on the winning end of that transfer, you can do very well. I mean, I think I've positioned myself. I think I've positioned my clients to be on the winning end of that transfer. And we're just, sitting back and just, watching it happen and waiting for it to play out.
Before we continue, help us clicking that YouTube like button and subscribe now to our channel. This shows the algorithm that you valued this information. And it helps us spread that message. Sharing is caring. And now, let's continue.
Do you want to know one thing about crypto? I made over 3000% in profit in a few weeks. Fact is, the traditional financial system, the traditional money system makes you poor, not rich. If you want to earn $500,000, $1 million, you have to wait until you're 50, 60, 70 in the traditional financial system, and you probably will still be broke. And you will be old. This is not a sexy combination, as you can imagine. But the question is, how can you start in crypto and make these profits? Where to invest? Where to start? My name is Gunnar and I'm from Germany, as you can hear, and things are a little bit different in Germany. More about that later on. Fact is, there are lots of different cryptocurrencies. It's a gigantic universe where beginners and professionals get easily lost. But there is light at the end of the tunnel. There are 7 key steps you need to follow to become successful in this market. You have to know them, and if you fail one of them, it's literally impossible to succeed in this market. Just an example, one of the key points is your exchange, and one of the biggest are, for example, Binance and Coinbase. These are trusted and well-established exchanges, but, and this is a big but, you won't find the super profitable coins on those exchanges. The unknown super profitable coins that get gigantic profits are not traded on those kind of exchanges. They are traded on much smaller insider platforms that are barely known. And I can tell you what those super secret exchanges are and why they are so profitable. And another super important thing are the right information sources. The point is, the internet is gigantic. There are hundreds and hundreds of YouTube channels, blogs, pages, and much more. And there are also market makers and influencers. For example, Elon Musk, he is not a crypto guy, but the moment he recommended Dogecoin, it went through the roof, to the moon, so to say. But why did he recommend it? Where did he hear it from? He didn't hear it from newspapers. And believe me, he is listening to someone. But you have to know who, and you have to react before he is reacting. This is really, really important. And these are only 2 of the 7 steps you have to follow in order to be successful in crypto. And if you want to know all of these steps in much more detail, and if you want to have a comprehensive checklist, here's what you should do. There is a link below this video. Click on this link and you will get the opportunity to subscribe to my channel. Click on the link and you will see a video where I explain the next steps. So see you soon. Click on the link now. I'll see you there.